Hey there, reviewing today my Leatherman Signal. This Leatherman Signal is the outdoors, or they even say survival model of Leatherman. So I've taken it out and I've put it through a few little tests, and I've had a good hard look at it and a fiddle with it, and I thought I'd offer up some facts about it, then what I like about it and what I don't like about it, and perhaps sum up after that. So the facts. This is getting towards one of the larger size Leatherman tools, and getting towards one of the heavier size as well. I'll put the specs down below, but it's kind of in that class between, say, the Leatherman Waves weight and the Leatherman Surges weight. So a few things do make it a bit heavier. I think probably the addition of this sort of solid steel pommel here, as well as just the widening and broadening of the tool to accommodate the extras, probably have added a few grams to it. But apart from that, it's certainly not a small multi-tool like the Skeletal. It's definitely a substantial sized. It comes with a variety of tools that are geared towards outdoors, and I suppose camping. I wouldn't go as far as to say survival, because I think anything that's on a hinge, or I mean, this would probably be very handy if you were stuck in the woods, but yeah, survival, it's a bit of an abstract concept to me, and nothing doesn't really weigh in on my gear buying decisions. So what do you get for your, well, in Australia about $180, which I think is ridiculous. It's way too expensive. This should be about $120, the same price as a Wave, because the only extra early parts you're getting are made of plastic, and it's actually probably got less metal in it than the Wave and the Surge and all the other ones that are cheaper than it. So hopefully that price comes down soon. But what do you get for that price? You get a knife blade, which is serrated and plain edge. You get I'll talk about the tools later on. You get a saw in there, liner lock as well, that and the blade, both liner lock. You get a hammer pommel with a hex wrench and a carabiner, which doubles as a bottle opener, and also a pretty reasonable retention method. You get a pocket clip. You get, talk about that little feature later as well. You get a set of pliers with the variable heads in there. You get a whistle, which pushes out and has a ferro rod on the back of it. The whistle works upwards only, so that needs to be pointing to the sky. Downwards, yeah, it still works, but your lips do cover most of it if you're not careful. So fairly loud whistle, and it does go back. There's a certain knack to putting it back. Where are we? Did take me a little while to work this out, actually. I think, yep, you go in this way first, catch that under the lip, and then click that down, and that little bracket there jumps over the whistle. And then on the other inside you get the Leatherman bit driver, which is cool, the can opener, which is useless to me with the wire stripper, which I never use either, and then you get this awl. So those are the tools. Alrighty, so what do I like about the tools? Well, I like the pliers. The pliers are the rebar pliers, so the same head as the Leatherman rebar, which is a good mid to large size plier head for a multi-tool. It's got nice fine tip jaws, and it can cut wire and do all your plier functions, so I pull things out of the wall, no worries. The pliers are comfortable enough to handle. That hammer adds sort of a bit of a hand slide security, which is quite cool. But yeah, you can wrench things out of the walls, no worries at all with that. Cutting wires, you can use the, I cut some reasonably thick wire. I use both the flat portion and also the recessed hard wire portion, which is towards where it says Leatherman, and no problems at all. You can replace these jaws if they get dinged up. So I like the pliers. I actually like, oh, I missed this last tool here. This is the knife sharpener. And I do like a lot of things about how, I mean, whether or not I would agree with it, these tools are all great or not, they have thought very hard about how to implement them, and they've done fairly well. So that's quite an ingenious design. It's using the lock release from these locking tools here to make it so when you press that down, see, when I try and push it back, it hits that raised bit of lock bar there. So I have to pull that down to clear it, and then that comes off. And then you can use this rounded sharpener, which is hollow on the inside. It does feel a little bit flimsy, but you can use that rounded sharpener to put a rudimentary edge back on your knife, and even on the serrations. So I like those well. I like the general concept and idea, and the application is fairly well done. I like that there's a pocket clip, and I like that there's a carabiner. I think they're both good methods of retention. It does also come with a nylon sheath, which I think they've given you these methods. I'd suggest going with either pocket clip or carabiner to secure. I'd say it's probably the most secure way of holding it is with the carabiner. Put it on a belt loop or something like that. Your sheaths, the Velcro can always fail. So it's probably a really good method, I'd say. I like to carry it on my belt loop. I'll run some footage of me using it both on my belt loop and also putting it in my pocket next to and then alone with my pocket knife. So yeah, I really like the retention methods as well. Happy with them too. I do like that they've got rid of some of the more rudimentary tools, like you get a surge out, for example, and it's got this bit driver, but then it's also got the larger flat screwdriver, which I know you could use as a pry, but so they've had to sort of really sharpen up and be very selective over which tools they chose. Did they choose the right tools? Well, I don't think so. You don't need a can opener. That could have been scissors, just as easily been scissors. Just because it's the outdoors doesn't mean you're going to be eating any more canned food these days, and most of your canned food these days has ring pulls on it, so can opener can really go for multi-tools in my opinion. And then the awl is a good, I guess, a reasonable outdoor tool. It's got a sharp tip, but the blade is completely blunt. Let's get macro on that blade there. So you can see that thin silver line. That's just a flat surface, so it's not an edge at all. It looks a bit like an edge, it's not. It's flat, so completely not sharp. So that's just seems like a bit of a missed opportunity, because it would make a really good scraper if it was a little bit sharper, but I guess not. But all these tools lock, so I guess that's something. But I probably would have chosen only one out of those three for myself. Anyway, so that's what I like about the tool. I like the appearance as well. I like the black and yellow. It looks kind of cool. It's generally well constructed. So it's made in America. It's got Leatherman's warranty. So there's a lot to like about the tool. But in general, that's about where it ends with how I would have run this myself. So what don't I like so much? Let's start with the knife. First of all, it's a sharp and it's a thin opening hole. There is no need for it to have been that thin and that long. They could have fleshed out a little tiny bit more. It's different to the wave. The wave has more space, and so what you get is it rotates on the center of your thumb and actually sort of does like a circular. It's like putting a little Dremel tool over your thumb. So it does a circular twist around the callus of your thumb, and it actually marks you up a little bit. So it's just not a really comfortable knife to use. It's a really thick knife, which I think they've probably got in their head, oh, it's an outdoor survival tool, so the knife needs to be thick, but of course not. And it's still just on a really thin liner, so we're not going to be, battening through wood with this knife. But yeah, the knife's not a complete write-off. It does come very sharp, and it has got a really good wood carving grind there. See how it's a really long bevel? That's really good for carving wood away. I carved a little bit of wood with this knife, and yeah, it does really well. And then the serrations, I wouldn't have, I don't know, I used to think, when I saw this, I was like, that's dumb, that's, partially serrated blades are for, people who don't know what they're doing with a plane edge, or people who don't keep their plane edges sharp. But when you've got a knife made of 420 HC, even the most diligent person, this edge is going to go dull fairly often. So when you do need to cut rope, this cuts through rope like a boss. I'll run some footage of me cutting rope with it. It does really well. Really thick, heavy, you can see the remains of it on the table here. Really thick, heavy ropes, just a few passes once I figured out how to handle the rope properly. So knife is a bit of a mixed bag. So there's something to like and something not to like on the knife, but just that opening hole really bothers me. The saw, again, the deployment of the saw, it's through that little nick there in the saw. You can see it just in there. And there's a bit in the way of that, so your finger kind of gets between here and gets between the frame there, and you work it in, and there's not a great deal of clearance. You need to definitely have a bit of a nail going there to be able to get the saw out. And the saw, yeah, it's a saw, but is a saw this long ever really? I mean, do we kid ourselves into thinking these saws are really useful? Applications, trap making, which I never do. The only other thing that I think I'd actually use a little saw like this in, as I do use my Victorinox saws, is if I'm out in the garden and it's that time of year where you're trimming your trees back. So a few times a year you trim your apple trees back. Those thicker, woodier branches just don't really come off as easy with secateurs. And you can do some fine little cuts with the saw to hold the tree nice and stiff and really sort of work slowly and make a nice neat cut. So it's good for that. But the saw's deployment is a bit of a sticking point. And then it seems on mine to catch it's a little bit crooked and it seems to catch the frame, and I need to kind of pull it back across just a little bit. I know if I did it in a more considered way, then it probably wouldn't happen, so I kind of need to apply outward pressure to the saw when I fold it in. That's that. The fire steel on the whistle are a bit of a wash for me. I just think you have those tools in other parts of your kit. I know it's good to have redundancies and backups, but there's a few reasons why I don't like this tool. For one, you can see the plastic holder for this comes up a long way up to the edge of the steel there. So I run my finger along and I can't feel it when I'm running it dead along the top, but the moment I deviate a little tiny bit, you can feel those little brackets holding it in, and yeah, it does work, and you can strike it and that sort of business, but it's certainly not a long-term option. So you're going to be getting a replacement one of this all the time if you bother using it. So I'd just suggest don't bother using it unless it's an emergency. And also, just the first impression, I took this out of the box and I thought, oh, this is a good tool, but then it's just eternally rattly, and it just bothers me. I like, why couldn't they just have fixed it a little bit tighter? Like, I don't know, just sealed it a little bit better. It's just a little bit chintzy to me. And yeah, I know that's superficial, it doesn't really affect the working of the tool, but when you are holding it to hammer or to saw, you can feel it sliding back and forth in your hand, and it's just a little bit of a bother. So not super stoked on that. The hammer, I like the hammer. I should have put this in the things I like about it. I do like the hammer. Those little wrenches, I'll never use that. But I guess it's an extra tool they can put on the box, so there's an extra tool there and all that sort of thing. Another thing about this one, it really it's a bit floppier than most Leatherman tools instantly. I'm not sure if that's just mine in particular, but I'm thinking it's not, because they've gone to the effort of putting in this little lock here, which I guess as long as it's cool I've done something about it. So now it doesn't open at all. You've got that little metal tab slides up against the down from the hammer, and between the hammer and the frame really wedges it shut. You just pop it back up once you're done, and you can pull it out again. So you can see that closely. So you slam that down. Yeah, it locks into that underneath that locking lever there, and it's just a nice little way of securing it. But the fact that it needs to be secured, in a wave, you'd never have your pliers flopping open like that. So it's obviously how they've had to design this arm here. Maybe it's a lot lighter. It's not weighed down by all these tools, because it's really just got one piece of plastic in it and a real swinging hammer on the end. So it's probably just from that. There's probably not a great deal they could have done to avoid that. And I guess at least they have taken a step to fix it, which is admirable, I suppose. What else? Yeah, I think this isn't a particularly good Leatherman. It's not one of the best ones. It's not a wave. It'd be great if some of these features made their way onto the wave. For example, I'd love to see a hammer pommel on the end of a wave set of tools, because I'm often grabbing the face of my wave and bashing stuff with it. And I know it's terrible, but I've done that a few times with my Surge as well. And yeah, it's cool if they could figure out how to stick that onto one of the more mainstream tools. That'd be really, really cool. I mean, they sell it for banging in tent pegs, but nah. When you've got a Leatherman and your upper ladder and stuff, you'll always see something you need to tap in, and it's good they've finally put a tool on. So that's really, really good. I think that it's tricky, because they've obviously had they've had a vision of what they wanted to do and what tools they wanted to have on the tool, and they've done it about as elegantly as you can do it. It's just I probably wouldn't have even worried about putting these tools on here. That's all. I would have put scissors on it. I think that can opener could have gone, and scissors could have gone there just as easily. And yeah, and just the extras. The knife sharpener is probably a cool thing to have. I'd keep the knife sharpener. I'd probably lose this whistle and this fire steel thing. It's just not realistic that it's going to be a real user or anything like that, I don't think. And the saw, I don't know why they couldn't have just done an opening hole on the saw, like on the knife, or ideally bigger than the one on the knife, so you could open it like that, instead of having to fish down and pluck the saw out by this little tooth here. Just a bit. For example, if you were out camping and you had gloves on and your hands were cold, you'd end up just trying to wrench it out from here, I think, or taking off your gloves, and really, it's not easy. So just that as well. So yeah, for $180, I wouldn't recommend Leatherman Signal, which is what I paid for it, because I'm a Leatherman guy. I'm always curious about multi-tools, and all that sort of thing. And I'm going to use this, but it's definitely not for everyone. I think the ideal person for this would be someone who owns like fruit trees, someone who has like an acreage or something that does a fair bit of like outdoor work, but not necessarily outdoor survival. So perhaps someone who worked in an orchard, or someone who just grew lots of their own fruit and veg, having a little saw on there, having a little sharp little knife, and the ability to cut cable ties really easily with the serrated portion of the blade, the hammer and that sort of stuff. Really good for that, and also the great retention methods. But just for everyone else, it's not even close to the utility of a wave or a surge. I think they should go with pocket clips on all their models, and I think they should go with the replaceable cutters and the stocky head, and I think the hammer should be try and get that on as many of their base models as they can, but I think a lot of the other stuff I'd be happy to leave. So that's my review of the Leatherman. So sorry it's not a super good news review. If you saw this for like $100, I'd say get one, because it's just cool for the novelty, and it's a cool tool. Like, it's fun and it's interesting, it's unique. But yeah, unless you've already got at least one or two of the main Leathermans, and by main Leathermans I mean there's like the EDC ones like the Juices and the Skeletals, and then there's your proper tool replacement ones like the Wave and the Super Tool. If you've got both of those bases covered and you're after that sort of, maybe that more oddball third one, you could choose either this or the OHT or the Crunch or something like that. Yeah, definitely give this one a go if the price was down a little bit, because the materials and the build and everything just really isn't worth $180 in Australia just yet. So that's my thoughts, and thanks so much for watching, y'all. I'll see you later.